Hello, everyone. This is Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I'm thrilled to welcome you to one of our general sessions, the Social CFO, Leading Across and Beyond the Enterprise. I think I came up with the concept of the Social CFO probably about 4 months or so ago, because we've always talked about how the CFO needs to lead across the enterprise. And that's really been the goal, which I've seen in priority for the last few years. And then I started thinking one of the inherent barriers to that would be that by nature, CFOs are not social. And so we're going to give you some theory and practice around how to be that social CFO and not only lead across the enterprise beyond finance, but also beyond the enterprise with your banks and suppliers and customers as well. And so first and foremost, I am thrilled and honored to have with me today two CFOs. I've got Mike Ellis, he is the CFO Flywire, and then we've got Jason Lin, the CFO of Centage. So why don't you get us started here? Just give us a little bit of your background and a little bit of your experience, and then we'll dive into some questions. Mike, would you like to go ahead and lead us off, please?
Sure. Thanks, Ernie. Hello, everybody. So my background is pretty classical, 10 years in public accounting, and I've spent the last 15 to 20 years as a CFO, predominantly in the fintech space. My current company is called Flywire, and that's basically a platform for cross-border and domestic payments on behalf of predominantly students and patients, so predominantly in the higher education and healthcare verticals. And prior to that, I was the CFO of a company called CashStar that dealt with digital gifting. And prior to that, I was with Castle Software that provided a platform for traders in trading equities. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Jason?
Yeah, thanks, Ernie, and thanks everyone for joining. And Ernie, thank you for kind of setting this up. So yeah, Jason Lin, again, CFO at Centage Corporation. Been in finance for over 20 years now. Started my career actually in the financial leadership development program at Raytheon, and have just progressed towards kind of tech and SaaS. Prior to Centage, I was director of FP&A at ZoomInfo, and before that, I was a divisional CFO at Monster.com. So yeah, same with Mike. Super excited about this conversation. I think that being a social CFO is very, very important, particularly now. So happy to be here.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. So let me give you a little bit of an overview. So we're going to start things off at a high level. So we're going to start off with kind of, my thoughts in theory, but then in practice, what our esteemed panelists, what do they think about? What is a social CFO, right? And then as a social CFO, first and foremost, let's get our team in order, right? We want to lead across the enterprise. First, we have to lead, right, within our finance team. So how do we lead across the team? How do we empower our team? How do we construct, right, our team? And how has that changed, right, over the careers of our panelists? And then the art of collaborating beyond finance, which is really about impacting performance across the enterprise. I think one of the things that I often mention is that up until a few years ago, I'm not sure that that was even possible because of the technology barriers. But I think now that we've got a lot of times our technology stack, at least part of it in the cloud, that's really enabling us to be able to fulfill that mission. Then we'll wrap things up with a few closing thoughts. So let's talk about the social CFO. So let me kick things off here. A little bit of kind of some of the structure that I've put around the social CFO, the way that I've seen it. I have been serving the office of the CFO for probably 10 years now, and I've talked to hundreds of CFOs. I've led a lot of CFO roundtables and had a lot of conversations recently. And I think it's really about a mastery of the soft skills, and that really sets the stage for success in today's world as a leader in any department. So for me, listening, right, and learning how to listen, to learn and not respond, staying in the moment, and then taking the time to interpret, and then knowing your customers. And then for us CFOs, a lot of us, we need to aspire to be a partner and not a referee. So back when I was in Treasury, back in my Treasury days, my CFO was a referee. He was always, there was an issue. So he really didn't have relationships with the customers other than if there was an issue and the customers were upset. So that's not a fun place to be. And then we need to, we need to collaborate with sales to understand our customers, need to talk to them. And then you need to know your team, right? We have to own the success of each team member. And then we also need to know what makes each person tick. So let me go ahead and dial in on a couple of these points. Jason, let me bring you in here. as far as knowing your customers. Can you talk about the importance of that, how you've done that, but then how that's become even more important since COVID has come along?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point. And one thing that I heard someone say was with COVID and the pandemic, it just really emphasized all the things that we all know that we should be doing, but maybe haven't been. And so it just kind of, it strikes that importance of knowing your customers and being that true partner and reaching out, not just when, you're trying to collect, when there's an invoice to pay, right? And that's exactly what we've done at Centage. And that's just we've established an executive sponsorship program where myself, the rest of the executive leadership team are reaching out to customers and just checking in. How are you doing? How are you enjoying using the product? How's your organization doing as a whole? Talking about, offering our ear when it comes to do they need things like relief in a payment program or things like that. Especially so at Centage, our customer base is mainly in the SMB. So when you talk about a small company, that kind of outreach and also those offers of just helping a small company along in a challenging time have been really, really well received.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Mike, let me go ahead and bring you in here. I know Mike and I have had a few offline conversations, and one of the things that Mike has talked about is really how the value of soft skills have changed, and really how people have need to transition from being in the ivory tower. Mike, can you give us a little color on that?
Yeah, so I remember, and if anyone has a similar background, when, in public accounting, when it was basically walking on eggshells, whenever you would go into a client CFO's office, and the aura that they basically presented themselves with was like, listen, we can't ask any dumb questions. You shouldn't do it anyway, but God forbid if you did. There wasn't a level of niceness that you probably felt engaged or empowered to kind of even have a fluid conversation. You seemed like you were always on your back feet or back foot there trying to kind of navigate through those communications. And, as I moved up into the finance world and became my own CFO, you'll notice my baseball hat. And I wear my baseball hat pretty much all the time. And when we think about how we interact with one another, I try to make it as casual as possible. Like, I do not want to be that CFO. I don't want a finance department that anybody within the organization or outside the organization would be afraid to come talk to. In other words, if you are someone who people are afraid to talk to, you will not get the information you need on how to improve your business, whether it's a cultural decision or even an economic decision that we need to make as a team. So the hat's a small indicator of that, but it's really just about how you present yourself. And as when Ernie mentioned this to me about being the social CFO, I couldn't think of a better place to kind of share my experiences, because that's exactly the type of CFO I wanted to be growing up and through this discipline. But it's been exceptionally challenging, having to explain to the board of directors why I've got a baseball cap on. They're always asking it, your new CEO, when you go get a job, is like, who's this character with the baseball cap? And, it's not only a conversation piece, but it does exactly do what it's supposed to do, which is, hey, this guy's just a normal guy. He's a guy that I would see on my kid's soccer field that I could have a conversation with about, the challenges that I'm having. And it really helps not only from the business side, but also the mentoring side. Like, you got to be approachable. And I think that's what I really try to endeavor, is allow my office to be open. Don't even have an office, but be communicative and warming to people, and you'll get the information you need.
Yeah, Mike, I totally agree. And on the point of the ivory tower, I mean, I remember back at the beginning of my career where finance and the CFO was actually just handing out budgets from that ivory tower, right? It wasn't a collaborative process, and it was kind of like, here's your budget for the year. And how things have changed. I mean, I know that just wouldn't fly today, and certainly in technology and in SaaS. And Ernie, you have referee on here, but I tell my team, like, we're not the expense police. Finance is not the police, right? We're not the approval police, and that's not what we should be doing. So it's a great point. And I sum all of this up with likability, right? So what Mike was just talking about was that you need to partner with people, you need to collaborate with people. They need to like you and want to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of dovetail on both of your points, I remember when I was back in Treasury and the CFO would come out, everyone would dive under their desks because it was like, I don't want to talk to the CFO. And I've talked on a few other CFO roundtables, and some people said that they had to start coming out every day and making the rounds, so people realized that they weren't trying to attack people. that they had to like build the relationship. So they had to make it normal, right, Mike? They had to make it normal for us to be nice. They had to make it normal that we really wanted to know what was going on. We weren't trying to catch them, right, in an expense or something else. Mike, let me go ahead and get back to you here. Let's dive in a little bit on knowing your team. Could you give us a little color, your perspective on why it's important to know what makes each person tick?
Yeah, the first thing I'll do is I'll give you actually some tangible ideas of what you should do as a social CFO. And I think the first is creating your own playbook. Now, that playbook should include some good graphics, some good pictures about what you're passionate about, what you are about as an individual. You know, when I did my playbook a few years back, you know, the first cover will be my 5 children, you know, maybe a soccer ball because I like to play, maybe a golf clubs, maybe the beach, you know, things that you do out of work that basically keep you energized and motivated Monday through, well, pretty much the whole week. And basically what you do is you kind of build a playbook that you would for anything that you're doing in life, whether it's a plan, but you're really trying to educate people about this is how I am, this is how I like to operate, this is the best way to interact with me. And then that way they have an idea of who you are as a person, but also as you're building your own playbook, it's very self-reflective. And I got to tell you, when I was first posed with the option to do this, I was like, not really sure that's going to help me, but it became exceptionally worthwhile as a document to do. And I live by it now. And it's the first thing I have every new finance person on my team come. I say, write your playbook. This is your first deliverable for me. I want to know who you are, what you are, where your challenges are, what motivates you. Because I think what happens is if you can find the intersection point between what motivates an individual and the needs that you have, and you find that intersection point, you're automatically going to get better work product and all time and everything that they do. And the last thing I would suggest is, with respect to knowing your team, we have to know how our team operates in a stressful environment. And the worst thing that we can do as leaders is put them in a stressful environment with a real deadline. So what I like to do is, when people come into my team or over time as I get to know their skill sets, is provide them challenges in a safe environment, an environment where the deadline's fictitious, so I can understand how they operate under stress and whether or not they can deliver under stress. It's really a good indication, and it's also a good thing to do to somebody because you're actually preparing them for when stress does occur and how they should be handling it. And it gives you great opportunity for mentorship and coaching in a very safe environment, which I think is very critical for today's workforce.
Thank you. I think that's just incredibly insightful on how to build trust. You're building it out of the gate. So you're not, you know, so it's like right out of the gate, you know where I'm coming from. I know where you're coming from. And I think it's incredibly powerful if you can take an honest look in the mirror and teach your team how to do that and not be afraid of what they're good at, but also not be afraid of what they're not good at. Right. I think that's incredibly important. Right. And then on the same way, you know, and then let's take it a little bit, a step up, know your colleagues, right? So I always say, understand the challenges of your colleagues, right? You might need to speak their language a little bit. Maybe they have a little bit different language in marketing. And then as you understand their challenges, maybe you ask them, how do you mitigate your challenges? And then the same thing, right? Maybe you need to know what makes them tick, whatever that connection might be. Maybe you both play golf, your kids go to the same high school, you go to the same church. So those are important. Jason, can you add a little color, maybe your experience on how you've been able to collaborate with colleagues outside of finance?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's similar to what Mike said. I think the key thing is understanding and knowing them, and I'd add on a personal level, right? So whenever I've got a colleague that I know that I'm going to be working closely with, I'll set up a one-on-one where we go out to lunch, and in the meeting invite, I'll say, we're not to talk about work. We're not to talk about the project here, right? We talk about everything but work of the project. Like, tell me about your kids. Like, Mike, how was your soccer game this weekend? How did you do? You know, let's talk about the Celtics or whatever else. But I think that kind of, you know, like you build that relationship. And to Mike's point, in times of stress, you go to bat with people that you know, right? You know, you go to bat for the people and their families that you know. So that's been really helpful for me. And you know, getting to know whether it's teammates or colleagues on a personal level, I think is super important.
Great. Mike, let me go ahead and ask you a question here. Can you think of a situation where there was someone at work who was known for being very prickly, and the fact that you might have had a personal relationship, how that helped you kind of get past the pine needles a little bit, or the cactus needles?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, because our immediate reaction to prickly things is to
Yeah.
not touch it, right? To kind of
Yeah.
step away. Unfortunately, the only way to break down the barrier is to get closer. And you got to deal with a little bit of pain first, a little bit of standoffishness, but that's really the natural outcome of those types of environments. And what you actually find that relationship is stronger having to go through that prickliness than it would be otherwise, right? Because it becomes more real and more, it's just an actual relationship that we can look back at and say, remember when we had to deal with this and we got through it. And there's just a number of situations where that's happened to me in my career over the course of the 30 years or so that I've been in finance. But I actually try to do the opposite of my natural inclination, which is get closer. And I don't care who it is and what it's about, you have to get closer. Now that may mean you have to get closer to the reality that they're trying to share with you, which you may disagree with, but that just means you need to open up a little bit and understand their perspectives, like walk in their shoes, and maybe you can understand a little bit more readily what they're struggling with or what's the problem. Because in most cases, especially when you're thinking about the fact that when you're interacting with colleagues in work, or if you're even at the executive level interacting with executives, the fact of the matter is that you went into this business and they came into this business knowing that there were skills, talents that you possessed that they could leverage, right? Every single job that we ever take in our career should also look at the assessment of our coworkers to understand what I can learn from them, what can I leverage from them in order to refine my skill set, right? It's no different than a marriage, right? From the standpoint of most time opposite attracts. There's something in that person that I want to be able to do that I can't do today, that I need to be able to do to actually further my professional development, not in the format of just career, but overall being a better person, right? A better, well-rounded person. So sometimes you have to do what doesn't come natural or what would appear to be not instinctual. So embrace that opportunity, not necessarily physically, but embrace that opportunity of getting closer to somebody to kind of understand what's driving them.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I want to share my perspective as someone that was known to be prickly, believe it or not, back in the day. So oftentimes, like you said, you have a fear of someone being prickly, but oftentimes the person may not know that they're being prickly, right? And so that just might be they're intense, they're passionate, they're energetic. And if you make that personal connection with them, you're playing golf or something, you look up from your putt and say, hey, John, man, why'd you get so upset, and make a joke out of it? And then I'll be like, oh, I really wasn't trying to do that. Well, John, perception is reality. So I think sometimes, there's ways to kind of diffuse the situation. So let's kind of transition a little bit to another topic that I've kind of latched onto here, which is really the value of storytelling. I had a conversation with Mike and Jason. It was really interesting for me to look at the other side of storytelling. So we're going to look at both sides of storytelling. One is the value of storytelling, but then also there's a little bit of danger involved, right, in storytelling in a certain ways as a CFO. And so, Jason, can you give us a little bit of your take on the value of storytelling as you see it?
I think in leading a team, the value of storytelling is immensely important. I mean, being able to look back on past experiences that you've been through and to say, hey guys, let me tell you a story about when I went through this exact same thing at this period of my career that was similar to yours. Coming across as genuine, coming across as wanting to kind of impart knowledge and share with folks is super important. And then as far as a storytelling perspective, from a leadership perspective, talking to your board, I think that the danger that you're talking about there is, as finance people, to us, the numbers are the numbers, right? But sometimes when you look across a leadership team, CEOs, CROs, the numbers aren't exactly the numbers. So you have to be careful and just remember your responsibility as the financial lead for an organization. I mean, that falls on you. At the end of the day, if the storytelling becomes a little bit too optimistic, I'll call it, and questions come from that, everyone that I just named, the board, the CEO, they're going to point to you. They're going to say, Jason, Mike, well, you signed off on these numbers. You said the growth was going to be 50%. So just remember that when it comes to storytelling.
Okay, great. Mike, can you go ahead and give us your kind of both sides of the coin, the value, and then also if you could share with us how you might train your team to be a little better storytellers. But then obviously the opposite side of that is, what are some of the dangers that you see along the lines of what Jason discussed?
Yeah, I think your bullet points really hit it hard, Ernie, and they're well thought of. But I would probably bring it down maybe another level of clarity, right? And anytime you're doing storytelling, it has to be relevant, it has to be interesting, and it has to be concise.
Yeah.
Those three things are really critical whenever you're talking about storytelling. But what storytelling does from a team dynamic is it actually allows you to actually develop that mentorship relationship with your coworkers, right? When they can resonate with what you're sharing with them, they look to you now as someone that can understand the dilemma, the challenges, and then you can actually provide them, at least from your perspective, a path, right? And that's really what, as leaders, we need to do, right? We need to show them a path typically. And at the same time, allow them to be hopeful, right? We can have a bunch of stories that are all negative. I'm not suggesting we should be storytelling our negative stories all the time. There has to be a level of hopefulness for people. And that's where you have to kind of really bridge that gap, because sometimes it's woe's me. It's like, oh yeah, I walked the 100 yards in snow with bare feet to the school. And if you didn't do that, then you're less of a person. And that's not the message of storytelling. The message of storytelling is to make sure that we're understanding where someone is. We're explaining to them that we've been there before. And if we haven't, being honest about we haven't been there before. But if we have, giving them not only the facts of how you dealt with it, but hopefully the positivity that actually came from it, right? And that's the really true connection point. From the standpoint of how we become mentors and why people would want to even listen to us. And that goes right into the boardroom. It goes right into the management team meetings. It's your ability to understand what someone's trying to achieve and put it in maybe in a different context so people can actually embrace it and have that resonate with them themselves. Jason really hit it hard though, which is really appropriate, right? We're always stuck in the middle between facts and maybe some irrational exuberance. And we have to find that delicate balance between the two where we maintain credibility with our board from a trustworthy standpoint, but we're also viewed as strategic and thoughtful from a CEO's perspective. Sometimes those things can conflict. And the way to kind of battle through that is to do that prior to the board meeting, prior to the investor meeting. Make sure you know what your position is. Make sure that the CEO knows what you're going to say. Go through that process, practice it. It's no different than an earnings call for a public company. It's the same in a private company. You have to know what your role is, what you're supposed to say, what the CEO is going to say. And there's going to be times when it's supposed to be a dichotomy, and there's times when it's supposed to be completely coherent, and that's okay. They expect that. They would not want consistent words coming from both parties all the time. They like drama, and you just have to kind of manage through the right level of drama with whoever your receiver of the information is.
Great. Oh, thanks, Mike. Every time I speak to Mike and Jason, I think my brain goes into overdrive and I have all these great ideas. And Mike, a couple of things you just said, one of the things that really stuck with me was, and I'm going to create a new concept, Jason, I'm going to ask you to comment about it. How about mentoring across the enterprise, which you just talked about, Mike? I've never heard anyone talk about that. So not only how do you lead, we always talk about mentoring the people in our department, but how do we mentor people that aren't in our department? So that's a whole nother conversation, but that's incredibly and compelling topic that we're going to pursue. So let's talk about your finance team. So let's kind of touch on how you assemble them and then how you empower them. And so for me, this is from my experience, what I've always heard, and I've been out of the game of being a CFO and hiring folks for a long time. So really what I used to hear all the time was A players. You got to hire the A players. You got to get the people, that have the best fit. They look good on the paper. We need the A players. It wasn't so much a concern about the dynamics, and it was a concern about the culture, but it really was a concern about your style. So when we were going through layoffs back in the day, the CEO came around and I overheard the conversation. He said, okay, Don, who are your A players? Anyone that's not an A player, they're getting fired. And so let me go ahead and bring you in here, Jason. And so can you let me know what's your definition of what an A player is now, and has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, the things that you have on this side are super important, but I mean, the key thing that sticks out with me with A players, and both you and Mike have said mentorship multiple times now already. But the key thing is A players want to be coached, right? Coachability, like wanting that mentorship, wanting to learn from their leaders and their peers and their colleagues. So that's incredibly important. But also from a team perspective. So my personal view on this is that we in finance, we're lean. My team is very small. We work many hours together, and team fit and kind of a person and how they're going to work with a team, work with our team. That's almost more important to me than the technical. I mean, I'm willing to train on the technical and hire the right personality or the right team player, the right A player, versus hiring someone with a ton of experience.
Okay, thanks. Mike, can you go ahead and kind of add your comments about, what an A player used to be, what is it now, and then maybe what's the most important characteristic that you look for in building your team?
Yeah, and I'll probably take the third last.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I actually agree with Jason wholeheartedly. But I think the evaluation of that cultural fit is where I think I'll get a little bit more granular. And really, it comes down to a level of curiosity that the individual is displaying as we're having our first conversation, as well as how extroverted or outgoing I perceive them to be relative to the nature of their questions and how they actually present themselves. Those are the two big cultural criterias that I kind of have, like relative to will this person fit or not? Will they fit in the world of my dynamic being, right? And I want them to be approachable. And that's indicative, I think, of that level of the ability to ask the question. Because really the person that I'm asking to bring on board is not someone that's going to just basically transact in a cubicle. I want someone who's going to go out and talk to people within the organization to understand pain points, to understand value, and how we can actually optimize it. And really that comes down to one overarching figure that or character that I'm looking for. Will this person be thinking of themselves as an owner of this business, or will they just be a participant and an employee? And that's really the every time I'm interviewing somebody, that's really what I'm trying to ascertain. How will I answer this question at the end of the interview is going to really decide whether or not this person's going to work or not for me. He or she have already met the criteria relative to a technical capability. So really what creates that A player is that level of ownership and curiosity more than it is about technical capability. Now, that goes without saying, right? When you're dealing with and your role is, I need a GAAP expert in the United States. Listen, it's already on the resume. She's already spent 10 years doing public accounting. They know RevRec. I don't need to go into, well, talk to me about how you would actually adopt, the most recent revenue recognition criteria. I'm assuming that they already have that. And I'll have my controller kind of manage that process. But when it reaches my desk, it's really about that level of curiosity. And I think that's the telltale sign of whether or not I think they're going to be an owner of the business, at least in how they operate.
100%, Mike. I mean, I love what you said there, because that kind of natural curiosity you're going to build a team there that goes beyond just the financial numbers, right? And gets that deep operational understanding of the business, which is what we want our teams to be in being true business partners.
Let me add one more thing to that, because I can't stress enough the level of credibility the finance department gets when they see engaged, outgoing accountants asking questions of vice presidents, directors about, hey, how's your business going? I need to learn more about our clients. What's your pain points relative to what you're experiencing in your reporting? And then you get into the management team meeting and they're like, that girl is awesome. I can't believe how much she's engaged. We have to find 100 more of these people across the entire company. And I think that's really, again, what I'm trying to build in the finance is that everybody wants to be around the finance people because they're engaged, they're energetic, they ask great questions, they're curious, and they're really treating this like this is a one-person business and they're the sole owner.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. Yeah, you guys really have hit on, I know you guys are both social CFOs. I think what you both just said is really a base of why you're both such good leaders, because you have to have the culture where you encourage people to ask questions and there's no consequences, but you also have to hire people that are willing to be questioned, right? And so that's a totally different animal. And so to let someone feel like they can think like the CEO and not be criticized or taken at, and then if someone on your team asks them questions, has to be willing to say, okay, this isn't a negative thing. This is an opportunity for cross training. And I think that is an inherent barrier to many CFOs being social CFOs is right there. Right.
Yeah.
So I shared the story with Mike that when I was many moons ago, I won't share what role I was in. I went to the leader and I said, I'll learn anything that you want me to learn. What is it that I can learn to be most valuable to the company? I have a master's degree. I can learn whatever you want. I'm really excited. He said, never mind. No, never mind. And I was crushed. I mean, I was honestly just crushed that I knew the company. I was being outgoing, and they were like, he was basically like, just settle down, you know. And I think you can really, if you're not careful, you can really, you know, crush that career a little bit. So let's talk about employee engagement. And so you guys have already done a great job of touching on this. I won't bore you with my boring graphic here. I just kind of like the bullseye thing. But so let's just kind of touch on engagement. And so, Mike, let me go back to you here first. And so, if I could let you share with me. So, if I ask you, Mike, when do you consider someone's engaged? What does that mean to you for your employee to be engaged?
Yeah, there's a number of characteristics that I'm looking for to determine engagement. And I think
Right.
you hit upon it actually the first, right? But you were thinking about it more in the context of the CFO role. But with respect to employment, empowerment, and engagement, are they listening? Are they listening to the needs of the business? Are they listening to the person providing them the tasks? Are they attempting to leveraging the skills of the people around them, right? So that all falls in. You're either listening directly through verbal or you're listening directly from nonverbal, right? So I think listening is really critical. The other aspect of that is executing, right? Are they executing and getting things done? Like, are they actually moving the ball down the field? And that's another indication of engagement. Also, the level of alacrity in which they work, right? I'm not saying they have to work fast for the sake of being fast, but you have to attack a task with a level of alacrity that basically lets people know that we need to get this done because it's really important to the business. And the sooner we get it done, the better it will be for all of us. And then finally, I think they need to be doing the research. And this is where you can really tell, right? And this is why the questioning that they need to be doing, or that curiosity comes into play, is they're actually doing the research, right? They're getting to learn the product that you're selling or the services that you're delivering. They're getting to know the business that you're actually operating within and our competitors. And they're also getting to understand the industry in which we operate in. And when you look at all of that and then finalize it with a level of newness to everything that you're doing, and I like to think of the word nascency or just being new. And if you followed all of that, you would have seen that my acronym that I actually go to evaluate engagement is the word LEARN. Listen, execute, alacrity, research, and nascency. And that's kind of where it's an easy way to remember about how you can actually evaluate employment engagement, because all of those things are critical to doing a job and doing it well.
Thanks, Mike. I think if I was a panelist on this call and the moderator asked me what I think about engagement, I would probably say ditto, but that's not fair. But I'm going to be unfair to Jason because I'm going to ask him. Is there any other area that you'd like to touch on, or how you define engagement, or maybe how that's changed during your career, Jason?
No, I think that the thing that I would add is just I look at, as far as engagement from our finance team, participation in initiatives or kind of subcommittees outside of finance.
Right.
And I really encourage that, right? So, you know, whether it's so we have a social committee at Centage. We have a diversity council. We have all of these things where we really encourage the finance team, again, to get outside of the walls of finance and accounting and participate there and be leaders there, right? So, you know, that's one way that I look at engagement as far as from a finance professional standpoint.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and we've touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to share this, and maybe it's just a big takeaway for the attendees. But I think that company culture is tremendously important, and it's obvious that Mike and Jason not only have their own finance culture, but also their companies that they're at right now have a tremendous culture. I know firsthand from Centage because they've been a partner of mine for a long time. So just some of the things for, empowering that team, just that culture, and hopefully the company culture aligns with the finance culture. We talked about this. You have to support personal growth, right? What are they doing outside of work? Let's promote that work-life balance. Professional growth, right? Cross training, new skills, the basis. Mike talked about the value and the ethics. We have to have a positive environment, and Jason knows what I'm going to say. Just because you're disruptive doesn't mean you're toxic. So, sometimes you have to have a little friction involved. So you've got to be willing to speak your mind. You have to communicate, right? It's got to be honest. It's got to be constructive, and people need to feel informed. Mike mentioned that before. When people feel that they're informed, they're accountable, right? Accountability. And then they have to understand their professional value, right? What are they adding to the company, to the department? And then what else can they be doing, and how can they enhance that professional value there? So Jason, since I made you go second last time, I'm going to go ahead and let you, I know you've touched on a little bit of these. Is there any dimension here that really speaks out to you, and something that you've learned to do more effectively, or where you see other CFOs might need a little work?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great slide. And if you ask me to pick one of these things, I would just say I'll have all of them, because I think all of these things are kind of the drivers of company culture and performance, right? But,
Right.
One thing that I really hone on in is on the professional growth. And I think that's because at the end of the day, look, your people, you're there to work and to grow their careers and to make more money, to progress and move forward, right? So I think, I try to make it a point to say I'm here, I'm invested in your professional growth, whether that means in your next step here at Centage or beyond, right? And I think that resonates with folks. They understand that I want them to be successful, and it's not just from a company or a selfish leader perspective wanting them to succeed on my team. I want them to succeed on any team in any environment, right? So I think the professional growth is super important, and I will add that things are going very fast. Everyone's got a million things going on. We're closing the books. We're putting together strategic plans. That one-on-one, that career growth one-on-one is the first meeting that gets pushed on the calendar, right? Let's talk about that next week. Let's talk about that next month. We can slide that over because we need to work on whatever else, right? So I think it's super important to just kind of, put a stake in that and have those conversations with your employees, with a regular cadence, to make sure that they feel that investment in them. What I love is when people tell me, like, this is what I want to be, and this is what I need you to do to help me get there.
Wow.
That could be right. That could be learning and development. They may want to take an outside class or something like that. That may just mean exposure to projects and initiatives that are outside of their specific comfort zone. And then the final point I'll make on that is documenting all of that, right? Super important to document those conversations and kind of have a plan, a career roadmap for every single person on your team.
Okay, great. And I love your comment there, Jason. That's a lot of what this conference is all about, is allowing people to take ownership of their career. You just outlined that. And it's a key to have a good boss. But as you mentioned, we have to document, right, what we want to do, how we're going to do it, and what we need to get there. We need to communicate what we need to get there, and we have to go get it. So Mike, let me go ahead and bring you in if there's any dimensions of company culture that are on here or aren't on there that you'd like to touch on for us.
Yeah, I'll take it more subjectively. I think Jason hit it really good from that standpoint. I would suggest that for my team, I want it to be tolerant and beyond reproach. So I'm really focused on the values and the ethics side of it right now, and the positive environment. And beyond reproach means trying to do the right thing every single time. Like, how would a prudent person kind of look at you making the same decision under the exact same fact patterns, and being able to back that up? And similar to Jason, being able to document that thought, that thinking. So when you have to look back at it 6 to 12 months later, you know exactly where your head was at. And that beyond reproach type of mentality is really what I'm trying to instill across not only my department, but the entire organization in my role as the CFO. And that basically parlays itself right into that whole aspect of tolerance, right? To tolerate other thinking, other modes of thinking, other ideas, and being receptive and open to potentially thinking about things a little differently. And I think those are really important aspects of how you can actually contribute to the culture of the company. And it's just basically accepting people for where they are in their life right now, and trying to be a friend or an ally as opposed to a foe or an antagonist. And I think that comes into that good boss side and communication, values and ethics. But I think those are all really important to developing the type of culture that makes people want to return to the office on a post-COVID basis, right? So it's real easy to kind of sit back in our homes now and kind of either not engage or not or just completely, not interact because it's easy. But we want people to come back into that work environment because the culture is really what makes our jobs so much more fun and tolerable for themselves, right? And I think that's an important dynamic that we can't lose sight of.
Thank you so much. So let's just kind of, we've already kind of touched on a lot of topics here. So I just want to touch on how you collaborate beyond finance, maybe across the enterprise. I've got some bullet points here. Most of these I've mentioned before. Some of just the one that really stick out to me, and people don't do this enough. It seems so basic. Why don't you ask someone what their biggest challenge is in their day? Just ask them at lunch and have them throw that out there. And then you can kind of put that back in your repository. And then you can kind of figure out as opportunities come to help you address them, right? So to ask, right? And then as we've mentioned throughout, building that trust. So maybe there's good news they have to communicate. Maybe it's not good news to you. If you build that relationship with them, then they trust you to give you the bad news, and then you're not kind of blindsided by that. So Mike, anything on this slide, any of these bullet points stick out to you or anything you want to add for us?
I think I'll actually take it to a different bullet point, but I will tell you there was a CEO that I once had, and I loved what he had to say. He used to say, facts are our friends. And those are really good words to kind of like just take in for ourselves and just continue to communicate the facts and the data that we have to kind of share with the other management team players. And one of the things on here that I don't necessarily see is like, how does a tech leader know when to bring on a new resource, right? They can come to me and say, I'm so busy, I've got no time, my whole team has got like 8 deliverables, we can't deliver on any of them. And it's like, all right, let's get to the data. Let's look at the analytics and let's get to the point where we can say facts are our friends. And then let's bring those facts to the team to see if this is the place where they want to invest. So I think one area beyond finance that we can actually help is really helping technical people understand capacity in the form of hours, in the form of how many people, relative to what their project plans are suggesting that they need in number of hours. Now that can be completely guesswork, but you have to start somewhere. And I think data always helps us get to the decisions we want. And if it doesn't, it helps refine our thinking at least about the direction that we should be going. So I would suggest that that would be one area where I think the finance person really can bring their empirical abilities associated with technical solutions, whether it's in Excel or others, to actually help a business leader make his case or her case for more investment dollars, right? And that's really what I think we are tasked to do, and the opportunity that's in front of all of us as finance leaders to kind of help them bring to bear and to bring to market what their ideas are in the form of ROI. And I think that's where I think I would probably focus my collaboration beyond finance.
Yeah, thanks. And kind of what I often talk about as well, which you said perfectly, was we kind of teach them the language of data, which is a subset of the language of finance, right? So we teach them how to change that perspective, what our language is, and then we help them put a framework around putting the facts behind their intuition. I think this is what we need to do in putting the facts behind that. And so just some of the other things that I've seen, that I've heard and experienced have been ways to collaborate. It's sales and marketing, helping them understand the behaviors of prospects and customers. We need to understand how we impact the customer experience. This gives us the opportunity to work with sales. We need to have a 360-degree view of what customer engagement is, and we need to create a framework for engagement. Jason, does anything stand out to you here, or can you share with us a story where you've been able to really make an impact beyond finance, and what was the flavor for that? Was it data? Was it analysis? Is there anything you can share with us?
Yeah, Arnie, I actually loved it on the previous slide. You had that bullet where it was kind of ask the questions, right? So, one thing that I'd encourage folks listening to this, when you're working with a new business partner, just start by asking. We've already talked about kind of this, the the historical ivory tower kind of concept of finance, but ask your business partner, like, tell me your worst experience that you've had with finance, right? As a starting point, let's just get that out on the table. And it's a great way to just kind of start and, well, I had 20 heads approved in the budget and they just pulled them all out without talking to me or something like that. And you'll have a laugh about it and you'll look in the eye and tell them, well, look, that's not how this relationship is going to be. But yeah, I think that and Mike's already said this, but ask and listen, right? Ask them what their experiences have been with finance, good or bad. And I think that you'll have a really, really positive conversation there. And then, yeah, I think a key for me too, with collaborating beyond just the finance team is know when to have concessions, right? And because I think that kind of builds your, you'll build a team within your organization that will want to go to bat for you as the CFO and as the Office of Finance when you show them, when they have an understanding of, boy, Mike didn't really want to approve this, but he's going to bat for us and he did approve it, right? And it's like know when to make those concessions to kind of build that value.
Thanks, Jason. I really love when you were speaking to, how to say what's your worst experience with finance, because that really makes us approachable, right? We used to be in the ivory tower and like we didn't want your input. What could you possibly teach finance? So you show them that you want to learn and finance isn't perfect and that they're an internal customer. So I found that incredibly insightful for me as a takeaway from the session. And so before I have some closing thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and ask Jason first and then Mike. So let's look into the future a little bit. Jason Lin is now the CEO of his dream startup company. He has to hire a CFO. What are the characteristics of Jason Lin, the CFO, that you look for? And what is something that you might say, I want to maybe be a little bit better than I see in myself right now?
Yeah, I think the key thing and, key to my success, and I think that when I've seen people really move forward in their careers is having a bit of being humble, right? Knowing that you're gonna learn from, I'm gonna learn from Mike, I'm gonna learn from Ernie, I'm gonna learn from my CEO. I'm also gonna learn from my, financial analyst that's 1 year out of school. So having that open mind and that ability to know that, every day is a learning experience. And then as far as, maybe something, so basically, Ernie, you're asking me what my weak point is.
Oh, well, I was more eloquent than that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's something that for me personally, I've had to develop over time, but it's like, you've heard the saying, like you need to be able to lead with the carrot and also with the whip, and just having that balance, right? Because, and that's tough to do because it's tough. Sometimes you don't want to be yelled at by the guy with the hat, Mike, but sometimes you do have to be yelled at by the guy with the hat. So I think that's a very fine balance of knowing when to kind of come down on someone hard and when to kind of put your arm around someone and say, hey, look, so that wasn't your finest hour. Here's how we can improve.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Jason. I really think that's incredibly important as a social CFO. I guess one of the things that I say, for me, my motto is be a human being first and always. And Absolutely. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Mike is the CEO, once again, of his dream company. Mike's going to hire a CFO. What are the things that Mike looks for?
Yeah, and I would reiterate what Jason said, but I would add a couple of things. So I'm looking for a level of competitiveness. So I want someone who's going to be relatively tenacious, yet competitive at the same time with not only the peers, the competitors that we have out in the marketplace, but also with me. I want that ebb and flow of keeping each other honest and keeping us as in the highest level of effectiveness as possible. Because I think if you put yourself around people that challenge you, you're going to actually elevate yourself. And I think that's really, really important is you're getting somebody that's going to challenge you every single day to be better. Right. And anytime we're bringing on a new executive, the CEO and I will talk and it'll be like, is this guy going to elevate my game? Is this woman going to make me work harder? Because if the answer to no, then it's probably not the right person. Like I want someone in the room that's going to elevate all of us. Right. And I think that's really important. So that aspect of competitiveness and that thinking about it as it's new. The other side of it is, I don't want someone who's just going to be doing finance. I want someone who's going to embrace the business, right? And when I talked about owning the business, like they have to really think about the fact that they are an owner of the business, regardless of what your ownership percentage is. It's not about, you know, the number of percentage points you own of the business. It's about how you actually interact as an owner, not necessarily what the return may be in a number of years from now. So I think those are really the three major points I would probably bring to bear for my CFO. You know, tenacious, competitive, and he owns this business just like I do, or she owns the business just like I do.
Thank you so much, Mike. And just a few closing thoughts that I think we've really honed in on. I think all these are important. We across the board, be authentic, right? You have to be authentic to be trusted. You have to be authentic to build consensus. You have to be authentic to be successful. You have to, like Jason said, you have to find, and Mike as well, you have to have joy. You have to have some fun, and you have to build relationships. And if you're not authentic, that's a huge inherent barrier. And as we talked about, listen, listen, listen. And Jason would say, ask and listen, right? So maybe I put ask there. Invest in knowing your team, what makes them tick, and let them know you, know your colleagues, right? Let them get to know you, know your customers. You know, it seems weird if you look back that CFO is now is a relationship business, right? We've talked about it, but it is. It's all about the relationships. And so thank you so much, Mike and Jason, for your time and your insights. And I would have to say that if you guys are ever recruiting for your teams, this session could be like you can get the best and the brightest in the entire countries. And if I was looking for a job, I would certainly jump over myself to work for you guys. So you guys really capture what I think a CFO is and what a good leader should be. So thank you so much, you guys. I really learned a lot and it was fun. And so thank you so much, everyone else, for attending this session. I have no doubt that this content is going to be incredibly valuable to you in helping you own your career and be a better leader. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope that you are enjoying your conference experience.